Welcome to Season 3 of the Robertson and Easterling podcast. I'm Matt Easterling.
And I'm Craig Robertson. Matt and I are board-certified family law attorneys with decades of combined experience serving Mississippians throughout our fine state.
In 2019, we began wondering if the struggles our firm deals with on a daily basis could be used to help the general public. And from there, the Robertson and Easterling podcast was born.
During the first 2 seasons, we had open and honest discussions with everyday people about their individual relationship journeys, some ending in heartbreak and others in redemption, but all with powerful stories to tell.
In Season 3, you will hear more of the same stories from other marriage and divorce survivors, as well as from our new co-hosts, Eva and Roane Hunter from LifeWorks Counseling. Eva and Roane are both licensed professional counselors, and we're excited to partner with them and hear the different perspective they're going to have for all of our listeners.
Speaking of listening, if you're new to our podcast and haven't heard Seasons 1 and 2, be sure to check them out on iTunes, Spotify, or your favorite podcast player. Now, sit back, relax, and enjoy today's show. What you're about to hear is going to help. Welcome back to another episode of the Robertson and Easterling podcast. We are, as usual, sponsored by LifeWorks Counseling and excited to be with both Roane and Eva today, guys. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having us again.
Got the good co-host, Eva's here with
Exactly.
you.
Roane, if you could try to be as quiet as possible during
I'll try to remain
this
silent
broadcast,
as best I
that would
can.
be very helpful if we hear more of Eva, less of you.
But
anyway,
a lot of people say that.
Many people say that, but we've got some great guests today. Roane, I will ask you to introduce them, and then you can be quiet after that.
I'll jump in. Man, we certainly are glad. We got Tray and Melody Lovern. Man, you guys, certainly so much of what you guys have been through in your own story and your own journey mirrors a lot of Eva and I and our own stories and then the ministry that you guys have and fantastic work that you guys do. And so much of that is through your own podcast, Undone Redone, and then the resources that you guys make available from working with couples and working with individuals, men and women, in this process of recovery from sexual brokenness. Y'all were featured in the movie. Y'all are movie stars, I guess, right?
You're actually the most famous people that have ever been on our show. So thanks for spending time with us today, guys.
You got to get a broader circulation of this podcast.
No doubt.
Dozens and dozens of listeners. I mean, we rank way up there. The movie documentary, The Heart of Man, which is just a powerful movie about the false self and the recovery of that. And then certainly how sexual brokenness plays out. Would encourage anybody that hasn't seen that to go rent that, buy it. But it's a really powerful movie documentary for sure.
Well, we're glad to be here. Thanks for having us and letting us share a little bit. We do have a similar story, and I know that you guys have already shared yours on, I think, the podcast, but we can definitely be in that same theme, knowing some of the ins and outs of that journey, no doubt.
Melody, why don't you just dive in and tell our listeners a little bit about you guys?
Ooh, well, we'll try to jump through a lot of the details and keep this higher level. But Tray and I actually met at Stanford University in Birmingham, Alabama. I was from Jacksonville, Florida, and was pursuing music, wanted to go to FSU, but my dad was a minister and wanted his girls to go to smaller schools. And so my twin sister and I came to Stanford University. So I was studying music, met Tray, actually Tray's freshman year, my junior year. I'm 2 years older than him. And here's this good looking basketball player. I had heard that he had preached in all these churches. And so we met in a cave actually. And about 6 months later, we started dating. We were in an art appreciation class and started dating. And I always wanted to marry a minister. Thought it would probably be a youth minister. And Tray and I kind of right out of the gate started doing ministry together. I loved to sing and he preached. And I don't know, when I saw him, I was like, man, God hit it out of the park here. And so we dated for 2 years and got married, and actually he was pastoring a church at the time. And I don't know, I think both of us kind of lived in this somewhat clean and neat world. Growing up, it was pretty much ministry. And my mom and dad had 3 girls. And I really pretty much thought I was going to marry Tray and just repeat. You know, we would have a family, do ministry, and eventually live in Africa. And so that was kind of where we were. So, Tray, I'll let you pick up with the details.
Yeah, so Melody did not know, nobody knew about my secret struggle. I was 8 when I was first exposed to a pornography stash. And, at 8 years old, didn't have a box to put that in. But it became my go-to way of dealing with emotions that I didn't know how to deal with. A lot of my theological, actually, probably both of us, Melody mentioned the clean and neat. It was like, we've got Jesus, so it's, yay, God, let's be the best witness to the lost and dying world we could be. And what that looked like practically for us is we learned to wear a mask. And we actually even spiritualized that because we thought we were doing God a favor to put our best foot forward to make sure we were the most attractive representation of what Christians are supposed to be like. And that was what was modeled. And, I say often that I was a present tense sinner and a past tense sin culture, meaning that, if sin was ever mentioned, it was way in the past, usually before a conversion experience. And here I was struggling in the present. So the way that internalized for me, especially with a big sin like pornography, sexual brokenness that I knew was wrong, but it drove a lot of what I now know to call shame, because my takeaway was I'm just not like everybody else. I am fundamentally flawed. And all I need to do was to keep stuffing it and keep working on it in secret until finally I would find the magic formula, push the right button, pull the right lever, and finally it would all go away. But struggling alone and isolated. But that was also what I would continue to run to medicate the pain in my life, the uncertainty, the not knowing what to do with negative emotion. And if anything, the fact that I was feeling negative emotion was part of my shame, because I had a theology that says if you're doing the Christian life right, there should be no anger, sorrow, grief, or any of the quote unquote negative emotions. It should be all happy, joy. Let's go with God. So that was kind of what I was dealing with. Came to Sanford, and as Melody mentioned, I'd preached in a lot of churches. Started preaching when I was 15. So now I not only have the family reputation because my middle name Trailer, last name Loverns, lots of trailers and lots of Loverns in the small town. And so I grew up I've got to live up to the reputation, the family reputation, God's reputation. Then I started preaching, now my reputation. And so a lot of performance. And again, yes, I was wanting to protect my reputation, but really I was sincerely wanting to be the best witness I could be for God. I'd hear in youth group, you may be the only Jesus some people may ever see. And man, I took that to heart. And again, practically, that just meant I need to hide everything that's negative and broken and lead with my strength. And when I tell my story, the best illustration, we just came through the summer season, and kids at the pool in the summertime, they see how long they can hold a beach ball underwater, and everybody knows it's a funny game because at some point that beach ball is going to come shooting to the surface with a lot of force and a lot of energy. And so from that first exposure at 8 years old and all the negative emotion, all the bad behavior that I was trying to hide, that was all this beach ball. And the older I got, the bigger the beach ball got, the more secrets I had to hide. And it was just all of my waking energy eventually was keeping this beach ball, managed and underwater. I met Melody, and frankly, leaving the small town, coming to Birmingham, it was an opportunity. Finally, I can be known for who I am, but I quickly got labeled as the incoming freshman who'd preached in all these churches. I was like, well, great. I can't let these guys down. So it was just, double down, more masks. I've got to repeat the process. Met Melody. We were going to save the world. She's saying I preached. It was obvious what God was doing. We're going to, have our now ministry team.
You also thought marriage was going to fix it.
Yeah, I did. I thought marriage. I didn't tell Melody about my secret for two reasons. One, I was too much of a coward. I knew she loved who she thought I was. I was unwilling to find out if she loved who I really was. I didn't love who I really was. So I was like, how in the world could she love who I really was? And the second thing is, I thought, like Melody said, marriage is going to fix it. As a common lie that a lot of the guys that I have the privilege of walking with believe. But when marriage didn't fix the problem, it took my shame to a deeper level. It's like now I know I'm fundamentally flawed, because now I can have sex in the covenant relationship of marriage as God designed it, and I'm still going to this stuff that I know is wrong. There is really something wrong with me. And so that took my shame to a deeper level. Soon after our marriage, Melody was teaching school by this time. I'm still in school, finishing a religion major and writing a lot of papers because I was an English minor. So I'd be up late. I found internet chat rooms. And for me, chat rooms, a lot of people go to chat rooms to be somebody they're not. If I'm honest, looking back at my story, I was probably more authentic in the chat room than I was in real life. Because for the first time in my life, nobody had an expectation of me. Nobody, oh, you're so-and-so's grandson. Oh, you're so-and-so. You're the guy's pretty, my whole life, I'd kind of lived in that bubble thinking, okay, what do I need to be to fit in, to be most accepted? And so part of the draw was, wow, they don't care about any of that. They're just getting to know me for me. And so eventually over the next decade, unfortunately, that led to sexual rooms, which led to one-night stands, which led to Melody finding out. And about 10 years into marriage, or 8 years into marriage, everything came out, and the beach ball finally came shooting to the surface.
How did discovery happen?
Discovery happened. It was like 2 weeks, about a week and a half before Christmas time. And Tray was in the shower. We had put the kids to bed, and he was in the shower, and we were talking, kind of getting ready for bed. I'd already tucked the kids in, and I got into his wallet really quick to grab some money because I was going to the grocery the next day. And all of a sudden I saw this receipt for the grocery. And I was like, you don't ever do the grocery shopping. That's what I do. And I saw chocolates and flowers, and I was thinking, well, we've already had dinner and put the kids to bed. Like normally he would walk into the house with flowers and chocolates if that were for me. And immediately I got this just like kick in the gut. And, there were things over like the time that we were married that, you can't put your finger on until after everything happens.
Exactly.
Like I remember one time walking into the room and seeing this naked girl on the computer. And in my naivety, I was like, why would he be looking at that? I can take my clothes off if you want, and just never connecting any dots, and, or I'd walk into the room and he'd quickly click out of something. And I'd think to myself, well, that was strange, but never knowing, okay, that equals hiding. And, or he said, oh, I'm just jumping into this. When you're married to somebody, you just believe them, right? And so anyway, so I began to ask him a number of questions that night, and it just was like crazy making. And the next day, I basically heard a conversation. We were supposed to meet and talk about it because I finally got fatigued enough the night before. We weren't getting anywhere. And so I was going to meet him and just confront him and talk about it. But I knew that he more than likely wouldn't tell me the truth. And so I jumped into the closet and was not there when we were supposed to meet. And I heard him make a phone call. And so that night I met at my girlfriend's house and confronted him and basically said, I know the truth. And that came out. But what I thought at that point was, okay, this is one night stand and I can't get my head around it. I don't understand what's going on. And the next week I sit in an office where he proceeds to tell me everything, the pornography, the online chat rooms, the 7 one-night stands. And, it's the worst day of your life.
Absolutely.
I just remember going, breathe.
Yeah.
Breathe. And then thinking, how am I going to take care of my 4 kids? They were all under the age of 6 and I was still breastfeeding our last one, but just how in the world can somebody live through this?
Right.
So, yeah.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. Trey, it's just as I hear your story and heard some of it before, but, exposed to pornography at 8 years old. Yeah, welcome to the club. And then, getting married, marriage is going to fix it. I mean, there's so many things. The big difference is, though, I grew up in the Easter Christian denomination. And so there was nobody comparing me to any pastors or Christians for that matter. But then when I did come to Christ at 20 years old, I was all in. And I always say, to be a 20-year-old frat boy and to give up drinking, cussing, and smoking, that's a big deal. And I did. And we started going to church. And as you said, sin is always in the past. Nobody ever talks, certainly, and those sins are usually, alcohol, maybe drugs. But boy, nobody ever talked about sexual sin, lust, even present, past, or future. And I just sat out there for years, sincerely wanting, I was dying on the inside and I wanted to be free. But boy, this thing was just eating my lunch and had no idea what to do whatsoever.
So guys, after discovery, what was the next step for you guys in your journey?
Yeah, so we, like I said, a week later, full discovery, disclosure in a counselor's office. And then I went to an intensive. I went to Mark Laser intensive. We lost Mark last year. He was a pioneer, certainly in Christians who were doing this kind of work. And so I found myself in January of that year, right after Christmas. I was in St. Paul, Minnesota. I think it snowed 20 inches that week that I was there in St. Paul. A little different, but kind of a picture of but it was an opportunity for me to get real, and I did. But here's the problem. My theology was always, or my philosophy of life was, to know better is to do better. That was kind of what drove this incorrect understanding of the gospel. If I know better, then I'm going to will away this sin problem. And so I go to this intensive, and it's great information. Love what Faithful and True does. I mean, it's fantastic, but there had not been a shift yet in me. And so my belief system was the same. So here was my takeaway. Took this great clinical information, and I said, oh, I found the missing puzzle piece. Now I really know better, and so I came back fully convinced. Now that I've got this missing puzzle piece, now that I've connected all these dots, I'm cured. I'm fixed. And and
then I went to an intensive like 2 months later. We were separated for about 6 months. And so I went to an intensive, kind of kicking and screaming, because at this point I was still kind of like, this is his fault. He needs to go get fixed, and I'm awesome and I'm great. I just need to help heal from what's happened to me.
That sounds familiar.
That's so familiar to me, Melody, that you are speaking my language. That is so familiar.
Yeah. So I went to this intensive, but I didn't really want him to know about it because I didn't want to give him any hope that we would get back together. But that weekend actually changed my life. It was the first time that I felt seen. I felt heard. I was off the performance treadmill. And really, I remember leaving that weekend before I left thinking, like, these are my people, like they know me. And even over the course of the weekend, just being so tired and just thinking, I'm so worn out. If one more person tells us we're this perfect family, I'm just going to die, and coming back and, long story short, we did get back together. There were some things that transpired and kind of some signs I was looking for, but we got back together. And then it was a year later that Tray had another one-night stand.
Yeah, and that was basically, as I tell guys now, because of that core belief of, I found the missing puzzle piece. Now I really know better. And I never wanted to replace Melody. My addiction was never about that. It was a deeper thing that definitely predated Melody. An intimacy disorder, as you guys know all about that. And so I didn't get to the root issues, though. I had put a Band-Aid on a much deeper problem, and I thought I had fixed it. But a year later, because I had not gotten to those deeper root issues, when the stress of life came and financial pressures and all the other things, I returned to my old coping mechanism. And on a business trip to Tulsa, Oklahoma, I had another one-night stand. And that's ultimately what led to our divorce and actually made Melody like an absolute fool for ever reconciling and taking me back. And, she...
I wasn't so worried much about being the fool, because I really felt like that whole year that we were together was really, it felt like, looking back, that it was God just getting me strength to be able to say, I'm loving you enough to let you go, because I never would have been able to do that.
Right.
Talk around that piece just a little bit, because I'm the divorce lawyer in the room. I'm interested, though, because, you guys are in ministry together. That was your plan, was to work in ministry together. And then he discloses this sexual addiction to you, and you stuck by him. You stuck with him until it came back out again. What put you into a divorce lawyer's office at that season of your life, as opposed to the work that you guys had done around reconciliation before?
Yeah, I think before, one, we didn't know a whole lot. So here I am learning about sex addiction, false intimacy, and just really beginning to peel back some of the layers of this world that I knew nothing of, And so I'm learning about that again, holding it very loosely, because my goal was really, I've got to heal from this, regardless of if we stay together. And that's very much what we're passionate about together today, is that, both of you have to be on an individual path to heal. Because if he does the work and she doesn't, it's going to be a hot mess. And if she does the work and he doesn't, it's going to be a hot mess.
So true.
Right. I heard somebody say recently on one of our shows that two healthy people can be in relationship and two unhealthy people can be in relationship, but a healthy person can't be in relationship with an unhealthy person.
That's right.
Yeah.
You hit the nail on the head. Yes. And so we had again, we were separated the first time. And there was a number of things that had transpired. We were kind of both on an individual track that allowed reconciliation to happen. But then that last year, I was a part of a support group. I was a part of, I remember doing Beth Moore's Breaking Free, and just a lot of things that I feel like were peeling back some layers in my own life. And so when it was almost like I knew the weekend that Tray was going to have that one night stand. I mean, I had gotten to a point where I was like, man, you're here, but you are not here, and just being able to kind of speak to that, I feel disconnected from you, what's going on. And I just knew the things that I didn't know before.
Right.
And so the weekend that he went to Tulsa, I had a bad feeling about it. I was, he had said like a month or two before, it's getting more and more difficult for me to travel. And I was like, quit your job. We'll figure it out, And so that weekend, like I just said, I don't feel comfortable. You're flying in on a Saturday instead of a Sunday. You're in a hotel room by yourself. And his response was very predictable that it was something was going to happen that weekend. And so I found out a month later. And even after finding out a month later, I knew that we were headed toward divorce. But I had a number of people that just said, wait, just wait, let it play out and that type of thing. And so it did play out. Tray was still not in a good place for a little while. And so really, honestly, after I had a lot of cool people in our lives at a large church. And so a lot of people who were adults my age, but had been had gone through divorce when they were young.
Came in, their parents had gone through.
Yes, they were like, I was a child of divorce, and my mom used to spy on my dad. Don't do that. I was a child of divorce. Make sure you keep Tray alive in the house. I was a product of divorce. Don't ever disparage Tray. And so it was really cool. Like nobody in my family had ever gone through divorce, but it was almost like God was like, pay attention. Pay attention. And so I feel like I did a lot of things right, and keeping Tray alive in the house and all that. But let me just tell you, when you have 4 kids together and you're seeing them every other weekend, it was about 4 months. And I was like, I remember my son saying, Mommy, why haven't you forgiven Dad? And, I'm trying to keep him alive in the house. And we're talking about memories and camping and praying for Dad and all this. And my 7-year-old said, why haven't you forgiven Dad? And I was like, well, buddy, I have forgiven Dad. And he was like, well, then why aren't you married? And I just remember having this just broken, just grieving moment with my son. And he's crying and I'm crying. And I tuck the kids in, and then I'd go to the piano, which is what I did a lot of times at night. I would just go to the piano and just play until I would cry. And I remember like going to the piano and crying. And then I went into my bedroom and I hit my knees and I was like, Lord, you have got to take him out. Like, kill him, let him get hit by a truck, let him get AIDS, because I can't handle this. Like, it is too painful.
I know that
it's not like I quit loving him.
Yeah.
It was really more like, and this is what I told him to answer your question.
So,
I said,
I'm very careful crossing the street to this day.
You might should be.
Do you have a food taster? Yeah.
Do not mess with me.
I love that.
But what I told him when we were leaving the divorce, lawyer's office, I said, I could have been married to a sex addict. It wasn't that you had a struggle. It was, I can't be married to a liar. I can't believe anything you said. And I said, I will wither on the vine being married to a liar. And so that was really what it was. And just, I love you enough to let you go. And I hope whoever is next in your life, that you will do the work to get whole for your kids and everything. And so that was behind the prayer to take him out, was just, pain does not go away. And I just knew if he was dead, I would have closure.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
That's really good. But now, Melody, you actually, after a season of time after the divorce, you actually remarried someone else.
I did.
Talk about that a little bit, because to me, I've heard your story. That's actually one of the most interesting pieces
I'm gonna grab
of
my
it.
popcorn over here.
Yeah, that's actually one of the most interesting pieces of it, because you got remarried pretty quickly after you guys got a divorce. So talk about that season of your life.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I try to do so many things right in my desire to do right, because again, my motto is kind of like good choices plus the pursuit of godliness equals a perfect life. Obviously, that didn't happen with Tray. I kind of jumped back on the treadmill a little bit at this point. And I remember some people saying, wait a year, don't date for a year. Looking back, I kind of wish they had said, don't date for 2 or 3 years, because you're still kind of coming up for air after a year. You've got kids every other weekend. You still see him. And so I waited for a year to start dating. And, one of the things that I wish that I had not done that I did, I was singing in a large church, where when you're singing or you're in ministry or whatever, everybody thinks they know you. And I remember saying, I'm not going to date anybody from this church because, everybody thinks that they know everything about you. But I did end up going to a singles retreat. And I also said, I'm going to stay in my Sunday school class with all these families because I don't fit in the singles class. I've got 4 kids, and yet I also didn't completely fit over here. But I was like, I'm not going to quit my Sunday school class just because I'm divorced. So I ended up going to the singles retreat to teach the ladies group or whatever. And I ended up meeting this guy, and he could not have been polar opposite of Tray.
He could not have been more polar opposite.
Sorry, he could not have been more polar opposite than Tray. And I think because, I saw Tray, and of course, God hit it out of the park and all this, really all that mattered to me was like, as long as he loves God, I'm good. Well, but you need a lot more than that. You really do. And so I think I just justified so many things in my mind, like, athleticism is really important to me. Family friendly is really important to me. Just a lot of the things that matter to me. I was just like, okay, it doesn't really matter.
Well, and I think something that I've heard you say, Melody, too, and that I think your listeners probably can address it. Sometimes in the church, we are even taught sometimes, maybe directly or indirectly, to kill desire. That it's really our desire that's the bad piece.
Right.
And I think part of what you'd bought into there, well, I married the first time for desire. This time, I just need to be satisfied maybe with much less. And I've heard you kind of share it.
And I don't even know that I knew that was settling. I almost thought, well, I just had this ginormous list the first time and look what happened. So I'll just keep it really short and simple this time.
Right. Love the first time and money the second time.
Yeah. That's right. So, and I was friends with this guy. What was really crazy and always desiring Tray to pursue me, but I felt like he was always in a hunt for something else. This guy was like, no, and I'd kind of gotten a little sassy and strong in my voice at this point. I was like, dude, I'm not really interested in you. I'm not attracted to you. I've got plenty of friends. I don't need new friends. I was kind of like, no. And I guess in his head, it was like, yes. And so he ramped it up even more. Oh, I just want to be friends. I just want to. And finally, and my codependency kicked in and I was like, okay, fine. I'll have a cup of coffee with you, and it was
at this time he was bringing coffee at 6 a.m. to her front doorstep.
Dropping it off on my doorstep.
And she was saying, well, we're just friends.
Pursuit.
I'm like, Melody.
The hot pursuit.
Oh, yeah.
And I was like, holy cow, I've never experienced this in my life, And again, still just friends. We're just friends. I'm not interested at all. Well, anyway, long story short, I was teaching aerobics at like some resorts in other countries because I could go teach for free as long as I taught like 3 or 4 classes a day. And so I took my twin sister with me and we ended up going, I think we were in Jamaica, and then came back, and he kind of pulled this whole God card, which I will say it's my responsibility. I got sucked into it, but that was kind of what my dad did a lot growing up. Like God told me this and God told me that. So I come back from this great week with my twin sister, and I was thinking, in my head, I was like, well, God can talk to me too, like he could have told me that, but it was kind of this whole, God told me to, date you and marry you, and I could take care of your 4 kids and my 4 kids. And I had this really cool subdivision that had a lake in it that I used to go journal at all the time. And he was like, and I'll buy a house in this, in this property, and y'all can just play all the time. It's almost like he knew everything about me. And so how could I say no? So we started dating right after that. And what was it, like 8 weeks later? I think we started dating in July. We were engaged in October and married in December. So it was crazy.
How'd that work out?
Well, not so good. He struggled with clinical depression, and I just kind of went into happy homemaker. Let me just try to make your life perfect. And I was dying. But, honestly, I think the hardest thing for me was having to finally face, a year and a half in, looking at the fact that I'm going to have a second failed marriage, and how in the world can I do this to my kids? And that was really what God brought me to the end of myself of like, oh, so the good choices plus the pursuit of godliness doesn't equal a perfect life. And your dookie stinks just like everybody else's stuff. And like, let's do something here. So that was kind of a moment for me where I kind of came off my holy mountain and I was like, oh, okay, Tray and I are kind of level here. Not that I ever even considered reconciliation with him, but it really did a number on me.
Well, that was a really brave thing for you to do, though. I mean, you had this failed first marriage, and then you find yourself in a bad second act of the same play, and you had enough courage, though, to step away from that relationship.
When his clinical depression wasn't cured by her outgoing, bubbly personality, he left, and so that kind of made the decision pretty easy.
Oh, so the decision was made for you then?
Yeah.
Hey, this is Eva Hunter from LifeWorks Counseling. At LifeWorks, our counselors seek to integrate healthy faith-based principles with sound clinical skills. Whether you're struggling in a relationship or have feelings that hinder your ability to be all you were created to be, one of our trained counselors can help. We seek to partner with you as our client to find the freedom to live the life God intended for you. We offer our experience, strength, and hope to promote healthy relationships built on intimacy and trust. LifeWorks Counseling, the science and soul of connection.
Hey, I'm Matt Easterling. Thanks for listening to a podcast. I hope you're finding these stories insightful and comforting. If you relate to anything you've heard so far, or if you just want more information, you can request a consultation right from our website by completing a simple online form. Of course, you're also free to just give us a call. Family law is all we do. As experts, we have the information and advice you need to move forward, whatever that may look like for you. We would love to be in your corner. Until then, sit back, relax, and enjoy part 2 of today's show.
So how did you guys find your way back to one another?
I was, we call it our Grace Awakening. We talk a lot about that in our Undone Redone podcast. And, just kind of really this paradigm shift from growing up in the church, hearing the word gospel, hearing the word grace, but really realizing our journey is that I didn't really practically understand that. If we really said, here's my practical theology, it was saved by faith, sanctified by sweat, effort, and just get her done, kind of stuff. Showing God how much of a first round draft choice we were and how glad he must be to have us on his team. To go from that to him, as I define recovery now, God lovingly introducing us to ourselves, that he knows all the brokenness about us and he just needs us to know it. And I had covered up all that brokenness my whole life because I didn't have a theology that said God wants to join me in my struggle, especially not my struggle with pornography.
Oh, yeah.
I thought God was angry that I was struggling, that he was angry and disappointed that I couldn't get my stuff together. And so just trying to do the Christian life in my own strength, which is what many of us, do. And, we get all the imperative commands of Scripture, but then we incorrectly think it's our job to carry it out so that we'll finally get the attaboys and attagirls from God. And what happened with us, and I was probably about 1.5 years, 2 years ahead of Melody in this process because, we use the prodigal elder brother a lot, kind of as a backdrop for our story. We both were public elder brothers for many, many years until my secret prodigal was revealed, right? And then I had a very public outing and I became a moral leper overnight, right? Written off by the church, all of that. So now I'm in the pig pen and I'm having to come back to my senses when there's no hiding now. Everybody knows, right? And so I'm at a crossroads and I begin to understand that, wow, God loves me. And and this was it was Abba's Child by Brennan Manning. It was the book that really was the eye-opening experience because it was a Saturday morning. Somebody had loaned me the book and it was about 2 years after our divorce. And I'm alone on a Saturday morning. Melody's got the kids and I pull the book off the nightstand and for whatever reason, just start reading. And 2 hours into that book, tears streaming down my face, that book began to break the logjam of my misunderstanding of grace. And this was the thought. I said, God, you mean when I was 11 years old and you saved me at Chaco Springs Baptist Camp, you saved me knowing full well I was going to spend these untold thousands of hours looking at pornography and chat rooms and ultimately these one night stands. And then I was going to do it again. I was going to lose my family. You saved me out of sheer grace, knowing all of that. That thought is what began to understand. It never was about me. It was you did this in spite of me. And so that really began a radical shift of me understanding the gospel in a new way. And it gave me permission to go into my brokenness for the first time, because up to that point, it was all about looking the part, because I thought that's what God expected of me. And what shifted is like, God, you already know how dark my heart is. You already know what I'm capable of. You already know not only what I have done, but what I'm going to do today and what I'm going to do 5 years from now. And you mean what Jesus did at the cross covered all of that? That it's not what Jesus did plus my best effort that gets me in. It's sheer grace. It's all of what he has done. So that began a radical change. Going back to that church, it was like the Red Sea parted, because everybody had the view of me. And so that was my test of the gospel. And so I'd go back, watch my kids perform in this church that I was the moral leper outcast. And I'd hear the snickering and the whispering and the disdain and, the looks and all that. And I'd watch my kids. And this is what would be my refrain about every 10 minutes, sometimes every 5 minutes. Lord, they know a little bit and they've written me off. You know it all and you love me. And I would just sit there fully present watching my kids. And then I'd see another, person make eye contact and quickly turn away, and I'd have to do it again. Just learning to preach the gospel to myself. Because for me, the gospel was for lost people. That was my early understanding. The gospel is for lost people. Well, I got that when I was 11. I realized I am a desperate sinner who's desperate for a savior every minute of every day. And that was and so then that radically changed my recovery, because I dabbled in recovery before. But like when I went to the intensive, I was looking for the quick fix. I was looking to do enough of recovery to finally put it behind me and to be done. And what I have helped men understand is, listen, I think sanctification, recovery, it's all kind of synonymous.
It is.
It's not about us sinning less and less, but the more I walk with Jesus, the more I see my desperate need for Jesus. That's now, the closer I get to the light, the more my own junk gets illuminated, and the more it becomes clear. And it's a total 180 from what I used to experience. And it changed. And then Melody, again, her courage as an elder brother after this divorce, to see her elder brother sin in the same light. Certainly consequences are different, but that to the heart of a holy God, that elder brother sin and prodigal sin is all an affront to a holy God. Yeah. And that her owning that, and it leveled the playing field, and we began to co-parent differently, and all that.
It was actually the healthier that we got. And like he said, he was a little bit ahead of me. Like, it was more fights that we would have. Because, and y'all know this, as you're walking with couples in recovery and things like that, the healthier you get, it really actually creates tension in a lot of your relationships, because you're changing things. People aren't taking from you like they used to take you, or whatever. And
you know how to set boundaries.
So some of the shaming that I did with him, afterwards, because I did have this thought for a long time. If he was the, Disney World dad who, took the kids out for the weekend or whatever, came back, I was like, yep, that's the con artist, blah, 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 and if he wasn't, doing things that, I felt like he needed to do or whatever, it was like, yep, there's a sex addict. So he was kind of in a lose-lose for a little while in my head. But the healthier he got, it was actually arguments that would, would really flesh out some things.
So I think we need to tell the story.
We may not have time.
I think so. The
way you say it, we're going to have to make time.
We'll do another episode. Oh yeah, we got to hear this.
So I was driving in Mississippi. I was covering Mississippi and Alabama in my sales career, and Melody had gone through her divorce, and we were responding differently. And we don't get into all the story, but that door had closed after she got remarried, and right before that, the door of reconciliation in my mind had closed. I remember I was driving around Jackson. So I think as a tribute to your listeners, because this is Jackson podcast, we certainly need to tell the story.
Yes.
So you are lapping it on.
J-Town makes the story.
So for whatever reason, I was talking to her about the sermon. I think it may have been a Monday or Tuesday. And so the sermon just from a few days before.
And let me interject. I'm going to interject some. Okay. So we didn't talk about anything other than kids and finances. That was it. So like when he starts talking to me about a sermon, I'm sure I've either got an eye roll going on or I've got the phone out to the side. I'm not listening to this.
Oh, yeah.
And so I'm telling her about this for whatever reason, because like you said, it was just a business decision. Relationship at that point. And as I'm talking, she says this. And oftentimes Melody is a ready Ready, fire, aim is her
Is she an Enneagram 8?
She's a 7.
7.
Oh, me too, Melody.
With
With
a
an
7,
8-wing.
unless I'm talking to a passive man, and then I
Right.
move into my 8.
Yeah,
Yeah.
fire, aim, ready.
We got that
Yeah,
here.
me too. I connect so much with your story and who you are, Melody.
Yes. So I'm saying this, and she just kind of interrupts me, stops. She basically out loud, kind of the ready, fire, aim. She says, do I have to do what the woman at the well did to understand grace the way she understood it? And I knew exactly where she's coming from.
I said that out loud.
Yeah. And so I just said, well, I'm going to have some fun with this. So I said, Melody, how long do you think you could go without sinning? And I thought it was going to be a rhetorical ha-ha question that we'd be kind of move on. Well, it got quiet on the other end of the phone. And I'm like, oh, goodness, she's about to give me an answer.
Yeah.
This is going to be good. And so finally, after a brief pause on the other side, she finally did answer. And she said,
I said 2 weeks.
I said, 2 weeks? That's amazing. I said, how amazing. But Melody, I said, after 2 weeks, why stop? Add another 2 weeks and you've got a whole month. And then you could add another month. And man, you would be well down your road to this sin-free, perfect existence.
That sounds familiar. I think we
know,
have the
it
same,
does.
a little different, but yeah, I get it.
And she said, what did you say after?
Then I kind of started crying, and I said I'd be too tired.
That's great.
But and we say that story because Melody is the one that verbalized it, but that sums up both of our belief systems and this performance treadmill that we grew up in, that it's all about being small sinners and showing God and everybody else what a small sinner we are.
Yeah.
And when you're a small sinner, grace is not amazing, right? And small sinners need a small savior.
Yeah.
And the beauty of recovery and everything that blew up in our life, we use our ministry, Undone Redone. To have a name of a ministry with the word undone in it, that was less than perfect. Just that kind of connotates the shift. But now we realize that big sinners need a big savior, and it really, I think, yes, that kind of showcases her small view of sin. But certainly I had a small view of sin before everything blew up as well. And what the gospel does, it doesn't take away all the consequences, all that, but it helps us realize that this was never our problem to fix. Because if willpower could fix our problem, Jesus didn't have to die. It doesn't require a savior. And frankly, our flesh doesn't want a savior. Our flesh wants a little help. Then okay, God, I got it from here.
Yeah, I'm good.
But to really blow things up and to help us realize that we are desperate, not just for salvation, but I'm desperate today. Right. And that was a game changer. And
yeah, that was a game changer. And we started really after that, I had this kind of shift of like, okay, I'm really beginning to grasp that. I remember reading Prodigal God and Ragamuffin Gospel and Abba's Child, just a lot of that was really helping me shift. So we had really gotten to a point where we were co-parenting well. And I was like, I like this. There's not a lot of tension. He can come over and help the kids with homework. Again, not thinking at all. I'm kind of thinking, okay, I'm just going to be a nun. It's just me and God. I'm done with marriage and all that kind of stuff. And so, but we got along really well. We would show up at events together. I remember one time we went to the movies together and he sat on one end and all the kids in between us. And I sat on the other end. And again, still didn't think of anything. But I remember us texting during the movie and kind of cackling because there were like some people in our old church there. And I was like, I wonder what they're thinking, and all this kind of stuff. And so, I do have a little bit of an inner rebel in me. And around Christmas time, Tray mentioned reconciliation. Like, I don't know, he was helping put the kids to bed or whatever one night. And he mentioned reconciliation. And I was like, no, like we've got a great thing going. Like no two parents love their kids like we do, and I felt really comfortable. I could call him and say, Tal's being disrespectful to me. And it just worked. And so this was like December. Well, February, Tray asked me to go to the beach with him and the kids. And of course, my 7 was like, oh my God, that'd be so fun. And then I was like, ooh, what would the kids
Yeah, that
think?
was sneaky.
That would be awkward. How would I do that? And so of course I said no. But he texted me over the course of the weekend. The kids would call and we would talk and all that kind of stuff. Well, I guess it was like after that weekend, Tray had a tree fall on his fence at his house. and an insurance adjuster had come over. Well, he called me, I don't know, maybe it was a couple of days. I may be blowing this timeline, baby. But he called me a couple of days later and said that he said, I just wanted to let you know, I'm going to be asking out this insurance adjuster. And he hadn't dated somebody for probably like over a year or whatever. And he said, I just want to let you know, I'm going to be taking her out. Well, of course, my ready, fire, aim got the best of me again. And I was like, what? You just mentioned reconciliation a couple months ago, blah, blah, blah. And I just kind of lost it.
She's not a good poker player.
And so of course, Tray didn't say anything and we hung up the phone or whatever. But the next weekend he had the kids. And I remember when he brought them home and put them to bed. I don't remember what kind of words were exchanged at that point, but I think I was a little snarky to you and you left and drove off. But then a few minutes later, he came back and he knocked on the door. And when he opened the door, he like stepped in and he hugged me and basically said, I'll wait forever for you. Like, if you'll just give me a shot at reconciliation, I'll wait forever, and we don't have to figure this out. I was counseling with somebody at the time and he said, we can go see Dr. Langston, but I don't know what I'm doing. You don't know what you're doing, but I just want to see if this is a possibility. And so, of course, I lost it. And that was kind of the start.
Our two biggest fears, my biggest fear was hurting her again.
Yeah.
Her biggest fear was being hurt again.
Sure. Yes.
Well, if we're not in relationship, neither one of those two fears could be realized.
Right.
As soon as we stepped into any type of relationship, immediately those two fears become possibilities. And it was really scary.
We always talk about recovery is just simply recovering the life that God intended us to live. And it's not about some 12-step program or, those. And those, I love the 12 steps. However, you said it earlier, Tray, recovery really is sanctification. And, we don't complete that process until we're face to face with Jesus. And it's walking through, those things and the behavior changes and everything that you guys have talked about are all the things that are so important for a partner to open their hearts to the possibility of reconciliation.
Well, Tray, I wanted to ask you about that. So what I've heard you guys talk about is you started co-parenting well, your communication around the children started to improve. But what would you say to our listeners about what it was in your story that made reconciliation possible between the two of you?
Yeah, I think the big thing is what we shared about that shift in our belief, because as long as we were on that performance paradigm, there was always something else to do. And we were constantly, we wouldn't have put it in these terms, but now looking back, we were constantly trying to do enough to earn and keep the Father's smile. Because at our base core level, we didn't believe we already had his smile, that we had to constantly do more to keep him smiling, right? To keep him happy. And so that's what drove this performance treadmill. So when we could finally just learn to just rest in the truth that we already had his smile, that still our obedience was there, but our obedience, unlike before, instead of trying to make him smile, our obedience now was because he was smiling. And that was the game changer. We could finally rest. And that also gave us permission just to settle into our own identity. I didn't know who I was as a man. And that's what a lot of my addiction was, is I needed a female to validate me as a man. Right. And Melody, bless her heart, when we first got married, she tried. She thought to just add that to the list of Proverbs 31 woman and what she's supposed to be doing. And that was not what she was supposed to be doing, nor designed to do. And so we didn't want, neither one of us, and we walk with couples, I'm sure Eva and Roane, you the same way. For one of the first things I say, I'm sure neither one of you want more of what you had. Right. That's usually not why they're coming. But really, it's like, can we trust God for something new and different?
Amen.
Can we trust him for a new normal? And for us, it was that journey through pain.
Yeah.
Because pain-free was never an option. And as I look back, my theology was always looking for the pain-free option, because my theology told me, incorrect theology, if it's painful, that's proof you're not doing it right.
Yeah.
But now I understand that's hogwash. The pain has got to be there. That's the growth. That's the healing is on the other side of the pain. It's like having an infected sore. If I'm just putting Novocaine and a Band-Aid on it, I may make it quit hurting for a while until I bump it on something. To get it truly healed, it hurts like crazy to get that all to the surface so that true healing can begin to take place. And so that would be what I'd say to your listeners is, wherever you are, don't settle for the Band-Aid and the Novocaine. Like get with folks like Eva and Roane, folks who are trained to help you individually understand your own narrative, the story, the lies that have come out of that, the message of the arrows, as John Eldridge would say. And then how does that show up in the relationship? What lies has he brought to you as a couple as well? And that now that's become your truth. Right. But we got to have some professionals help us unpack all of that so that we can then undo it, to use the name of our ministry, so that then it can be redone. You know, we all want the resurrection, but it's hard to volunteer for the crucifixion.
Yeah.
Right. But there can't be a resurrection without the crucifixion.
That's got to be a death before there's a resurrection.
That's right.
Well, guys, we're almost out of time for today, but I do want to end today's show with the story of your remarriage. If our listeners can go back and listen to one of the earlier episodes of our podcast and hear about when Roane and Eva got remarried. It's one of my favorite stories that they tell. So I'd love to hear the story of your wedding, the second one.
Yeah. And I guess just you share that, but I just was going to share just a quick story that, many of the things that I talked about when we were headed toward divorce, of just what to do, what not to do, that I felt like were real instruments of the Lord to say, pay attention to this. One of the things that I didn't do that was very, very hard, and it's not because I was so godly or whatever, it was just, I feel like the work of the Holy Spirit was that the details of the story that Tray needed to share, or parts of the story that Tray needed to share, was his to share. And of course, on those days that I thought, he's never going to share, he's going to be 80 on his deathbed, or they'll just never, ever know. And this is going to be my burden.
With our kids.
With regard to my kids, this is going to be my burden to have to carry forever. And so we're dating at this time. And this is a real pertinent part to even, getting engaged and married. Was he came over one Saturday, and he had done some things, because, a lot of people say, how did you rebuild trust? And some of these were just very earmarked things that I could pay attention to. Yeah. Tray drove to North Carolina to sit down with my parents. Tray didn't put up with some of my crap that I would say to him. But this particular Saturday, he comes over and he plops down in the living room and starts asking the kids all these questions. And the kids and I had just finished breakfast. And so, of course, they run over and get in his lap, and he's sitting there talking. And they were in Christian school at this time. So he starts asking them about the 10 Commandments. And I thought, okay, that's kind of strange. And I'm, cleaning up, but kind of, I can see what's happening in the living room, and I'm watching what's going on. And so he's like, what is thou shall not bear false witness? What is thou shall not covet thy neighbor's, blah, 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 And then all of a sudden, and I'm thinking, where is he going with this? And then all of a sudden he said, so what does thou shall not commit adultery mean? And I remember it like it was yesterday. My girls, who were my bookends, they were like 11 and 6 at this time, said, is that when a daddy or a mommy likes another daddy or mommy that they're not married to? Is that when a married mommy and daddy likes another married mommy and daddy that they're not married to? Is basically what they said. And Tray said, yeah, that's exactly what that is. And I just want y'all to know that daddy did that to mommy. And he did that to mommy 7 times and really hurt her heart. And I just remember, standing in the kitchen, just like overwhelmed at the honesty, wrapped their arms around their dad's neck and said, Daddy, I forgive you. And I remember that being a moment for me of just going, Melody, of God saying to me, Melody, if you'll let whatever pain is still in here go. I'm the surgeon, and I can do a work in you. And I just, to be able to witness that with my kids, and for them to get to experience what reconciliation looks like, was just an amazing. So that, I think, like a week or 2 later, we got engaged. So that was kind of a moment for me.
Melody, it sounds like your girls taught you something in that moment, though.
Yeah, they did.
Yes.
Oh yeah,
and they keep doing that.
Yeah, that's a great story.
That's powerful.
So y'all got engaged. You did the whole deal.
Yeah, got re-engaged.
We didn't do that. We just went and got married.
Just went and got married. Well, we did another ceremony, and we just celebrated our 12th
we did
anniversary.
a ceremony, but
October 3rd, we celebrated our 12th anniversary of our remarriage.
Well, there were so many people that walked with us.
Oh yeah,
that we really wanted them to surround.
Surround. It was a beautiful service, and just a lot of celebrating. Obviously, our kids, but it was also, back to that fear thing. We knew that stepping into this, now both of those fears are back on the table, and we just knew that this is, kind of use the recovery cliche. It's a one moment at a time, one day at a time kind of thing. Just because we're remarried doesn't mean everything is magically fixed. But we felt confident we had a new way of living, a new way of approaching life, a new way of seeing ourselves, a new way of seeing God. And so, and just being off that performance treadmill, that we didn't have to work so hard for everyone else's approval, right? And each other, that we were trying to outperform each other. And really the big, change in our new marriage that we talk about in some of our marriage stuff in our ministry is, instead of being two people trying to outperform each other, we wanted to be the chief repenter in the relationship. How do we out-repent one another? And knowing the gospel and that what had been awakened, that we realized we don't have to pretend we got it all together. It's pretty obviously we don't. And our brokenness may be different, but it's just owning it. And again, we're big sinners. We're married to big sinners. And so, we don't have to pretend and play the whole tit for tat game. And that was a real game changer. So got remarried, and then we've been learning a lot since then. Just
how to
do life together, and then doing work together. That's a whole nother level of being business partners in a lot of ways.
Yeah, we know all about it.
We need y'all to do some counseling with us around that. If you,
How about we counsel you and you counsel us?
Yeah, we love that. We love that.
I'm always looking for another tool in my toolbox.
That's right,
guys. In the last few minutes that we have, talk a little bit about your ministry and the work that you do, and how our listeners could connect with you guys.
Yeah, so we have Undone Redone. UndoneRedone.com is the main page where you can go and find out what we do. So we basically, because of what we talked about, healthy marriage is made up of healthy individuals. We work with men. Melody works with betrayed spouses and has a program called Life Beyond Betrayal, where they can get into community and courses. And then we also do work with couples. We have couples come in for intensives. We have resources for couples, do marriage intensives ourselves at churches and retreats and those kind of things. But then we also have a parenting piece. A few years ago, we realized that 80% of first-time exposure to pornography happens at home. And so we realized that we're doing all this work on this end with people who are in crisis, but we need to be doing something further upstream to the 8 to 12-year-olds that are today first being exposed. And so if parents had a little bit of information with the constantly changing technology, so that's our My Secure Family piece. So really 4 different buckets, if you will: men, women, parenting, and marriage are where we do most of our work. Not like that's not enough. We stay plenty busy with that. But got a lot of fun things going on. COVID has actually, I know, hopefully, it's really expanded what we're doing, because it's amazing when all that stuff that's under the surface, when you get people, in a quarantined, put them in, lockdown for a while, it has a tendency, those beach balls come to the surface. And like I said, that's a good thing. And we don't want to figure out a way to get it back down, but really just God wants to bring about healing. And that's really our thing, is every heart living free. That's what we're about. And unfortunately, it's usually pain and crisis where they find us. And the hope that we offer is that can be the doorway to a deeper understanding of themselves, and certainly a deeper understanding of the gospel. We want to be sojourners with them into their pain, and not just to help them quickly medicate the pain.
Well, and I guess just the last thing too, that, with you being a divorce attorney, part of my platform with ladies is like, whether you stay married or whether you divorce, I really tell them to table 3 things when they hit this process. And I'm like, I want you to put divorce on the shelf, reconciliation on the shelf, and forgiveness on the shelf, because the bottom line is you got to heal, and you're going to be a better, you're going to be better, whatever, if you can go in and show it. Because she's thinking, I got to make a decision. All my friends are telling me this. And I'm like, no, you don't have to make a decision at all. Let's just get on a path and let's heal. And so I've created 3 courses that help a woman really walk through the trauma, grieve from the trauma, and then kind of reclaim herself after betrayal. After she's done those, I'm like, now you're going to be in a much better place to make whatever decision that you need to make. And if he's doing the work and she's doing the work, then reconciliation is definitely a possibility. But sometimes you can have restoration without reconciliation. And so that's kind of my philosophy.
Guys, you guys have been awesome. Thanks for spending this time with us today. And really grateful for the work that you do. Really inspired by your story. So thank you.
You've been listening to the Robertson Easterling podcast. Thanks for tuning in.
If you need our help, we're here for you. You can request a consultation from our website 24 hours a day. It takes less than 5 minutes. If you like our show, subscribe today on Spotify, iTunes, or your favorite podcast player so you can be one of the first to know when our next episode drops. You can also join us on social media. We're on all the major platforms, including Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Have a great rest of your day, and remember, there is nothing wrong with arming yourself with information. On behalf of the Robertson Easterling family, thanks for spending time with us.
This is Eva Hunter from LifeWorks Counseling. The Men's Coaching Weekend is a unique environment for men committed to learning a relational paradigm for growth. Throughout the weekend, men learn new relational skills and the essential resource of living in authentic community. The goal for each participant is to learn how to communicate openly and assertively while receiving constructive input that will serve as a blueprint for how he can begin to grow in all areas of his life. LifeWorks Counseling, the science and soul of connection.
This podcast is not a substitute for an attorney. All information is provided as a general reference and public service. Listening to this podcast does not create a professional relationship with Robertson and Easterling, LifeWorks Counseling, or any of its attorneys or guests. This podcast may be considered advertising under applicable rules, and free background information is available upon request. For more information, please visit our website, robertson.ms.